All right. So, hi everyone. I am Vatsala. I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft, and I've pasted my LinkedIn profile link here. So, for anything, just feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And before we start, I just want to say that I'm really excited to be here today, talking to you guys about the recent improvements in Microsoft technologies. And a big thank you to the MVP community for organizing this. So what I'm going to cover today is the recent improvements in MS Bot framework, and how that can help you as developers to be more productive in building more rich and more strong conversational AI experiences. So Annie already spoke about how bots have become a very important aspect of the technology landscape for any organization, right? So Microsoft is making a lot of improvements in its bot framework every day. And Anupama also gave you an overview of the major improvements that were announced in Build. So in this session, we'll just double click on these improvements. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is adaptive dialogues. This is an amazing functionality of bot framework, which has recently become generally available. And yeah, so before I begin, I just want to give you some context of why we need the adaptive dialogues, right? So something that's become very, very important in bot development these days is the capability of bot to really understand the context of the conversation and then switch context accordingly. So and that is where adaptive dialogues come in. So let me just give you an example so that it becomes more real for you. So let's take this example, right? Let's say you are on a travel booking website and you're trying to let's say book a flight to Bombay. And so let's say you're using the bot on the website. Now the bot asks you what is your destination city. And then before entering your destination city, you want to find out what is the weather in Bombay like. So you reply by saying, what is the weather in Bombay tomorrow? And so if you notice, you not only did not answer bot's question, you also changed the subject of the conversation entirely. And if the bot is not prepared to switch context, then this is where the bot would just break down and end up giving you some unsatisfactory responses, right? And we see this still happening in a lot of bots that we use every day in our day-to-day lives. So that's why I just want to give you an overview of adaptive dialogues and how you can use it. So before that, so what are dialogues, right? Just to give you some context of what are dialogues for those of you who don't know. One second, there seems to be some bandwidth issue at my end. Yeah. Moving on. The dialogues are structures in your bot that act like functions in your bot's program. So each dialogue is basically designed to perform a specific task, and you can specify the order of individual dialogues to guide the conversation, and then you can invoke them in different ways. So for example, waterfall dialogues, which are the most, that's the oldest form of dialogues that you guys must be aware of. Those follow predefined sequence and pass information from one step to another. Adaptive dialogues, on the other hand, are event-driven designs for building more sophisticated conversations. So let's understand how these adaptive dialogues work, right? So these are the building blocks of an adaptive dialogue, in which your trigger is what basically enables you to catch and respond to events. If its condition is met, its action will be executed. Then you have actions. These actions are what define the conversation flow when a specific event is captured via a trigger. Then you have something called recognizers. So these recognizers basically enable your bot to understand and extract meaningful pieces of information from your user's intent. Then you have something called generators. The generator ties a specific language generation system to an adaptive dialog. And then you have the memory. So adaptive dialogues provide a way to access and manage memory. And all of the adaptive dialogues by default use this model so that all components that consume or contribute to memory have a common method to read and write information in appropriate scope. All right, so let me just take you to a demo of how adaptive dialogues work so that this becomes more real to you. So I'm using a bot framework emulator for this demo. Those of you who have not used it, all bot developers, I would strongly encourage you to try this app. It's a desktop app which you can use to test and debug bots very easily. So this is a simple to-do bot, and it can perform all these actions for me that you can see here. So basically, under the hood, these are your individual adaptive dialogues. So let's start by setting up the profile of the user first. So let's. So right now, if you can see, right, we started with the root bot, and then when I selected profile, it started basically it invoked the profile dialog, and it's asking me a series of questions where I can enter information to set up my profile. Now let's say all of a sudden I remembered that I want to add something in my to-do list. So instead of responding to this, let's say I am saying I want to buy cheese. So so I think, sorry, just one mistake there. So so I started with my name, and then it asked me my age, and then I can just tell the bot that I want to add an item to my list, right? So if I tell the bot that this is what I'm looking to do instead of adding my age, then it's going to ask me what is the item title. And now if I just say buy cheese, then it's going to add that to my, okay, let's choose groceries. So then it's just going to go ahead and add that to my to-do list. So what you will see here is that it came in, it invoked the adaptive dialog, which is responsible for adding an item, and gave me a summary of the response, and then took me back to where we were in the conversation, right? So if you remember, we were setting up the profile, and this is where we had left off the conversation. So after I'm done with that, it's brought me back to where I was in my previous conversation, and then I can just enter some value, and it has my profile. So so this is how I just wanted to show you how seamlessly the bot can switch from one subject to another with the help of these adaptive dialogues. Now moving back to my presentation. Right, so I just wanted to give you an understanding of what happened under the hood and how did this work during runtime. So as you can see, when you start interacting with the bot, it will start with the root dialog, and that's where your initial intent will be recognized as to what you've selected. So since I selected profile, it identified that intent, and then basis that intent, it triggers the dialog which is responsible for adding profile. So now that takes us to the profile dialog, and then when I'm inside this dialog, the first action in its begin dialog is executed, and that's where it asks me what is your name, and then I enter my name, and then it asks me what is your age. Now this is where things got interesting, right? So we were in the profile dialog, and this is where the current action was expecting me to respond with an input for the age. So so since I responded by saying I want to add an item, the current action could not really get a value for the age, and then it went back to its recognizer to identify what I'm trying to say. So since this dialog is responsible for profile piece and not really add an item, so this recognizer could not really understand what I'm saying, and it took that intent and ran it over its triggers and none of the triggered match to add item. And then what happens next is it sends this back to the root dialog where the conversation's main logic resides, and then it's processed by the recognizer of your root dialog to really understand what I'm trying to say. This recognizer correctly identifies add item as an intent because it's modeled to identify these intents. And then again, the same cycle, right? So once it identifies this intent, it checks if there's a trigger which can process this intent, and then it finds the add item dialog trigger and then triggers it, and that's where it takes us to the add item dialog. Now, the first action which is attached to begin dialog here is then executed, and the bot responds with, okay, what is the item? And that's where I responded by what is it that I want to add, and so on and so forth. So I hope this gives you some sort of understanding and context of how easily you can manage different kinds of conversational context switches that might happen when a user is interacting with the bot in real time. Now, the next thing that I want to speak about is the bot framework skills. So this is also a super interesting update that's been announced very recently, and and this is very interesting for you as developers because it makes your lives easier by helping you build reusable bots. So to simply put, it's a bot that can perform a set of tasks for another bot, and in this way you can easily create a user-facing bot and extend it by consuming, your own or third-party skills. So this basically then enables your organizations to be able to stitch together multiple bots within their organization instead of, having a lot of different bots working in silos. And at this time, Microsoft provides some basic skills like the calendar skill, email skill, to-do skill, point of interest skill, which I'm going to cover in a demo in a while, and a number of other experimental skills like weather skill, music skill, etc. So these are all skills that are delivered as source code by Microsoft, so that you can customize and extend them as required depending on your scenario. So just to give you some understanding of how skills work, right? So as you can see, the conversation flow sort of gets divided in 3 layers. So you have your user, then you have skill consumer, which is the layer of root bot, which is basically the bot that user interacts with. And then you have the third layer, which is your reusable skills. So the skills and the consumers communicate over HTTP, as you can see here, using bot framework protocol. And like I said, right, the user directly will interact with the root bot, and then depending on what the user is asking for, the root bot will then delegate some of its conversational logic to a skill basis the requirement. So as you can see, the skills are reusable because we have this one web chat bot which is interacting with these skills, and then we also have a Teams bot which is interacting with the same skills basis your requirement. And these are truly reusable in nature because these are not really interdependent on each other in terms of the language that is used to create these skills. So let's say you have your root bot which you've coded in C#. You can still go ahead and attach your bot to a skill which is coded in Python or C# or Java for that matter. So that's how it really, brings the ease of reusability of bots to bot developers. Let me take you to a demo of how this bot framework skills work. So this demo I have integrated with my Teams channel. MS Bot can be easily integrated with different channels. If you've not seen it yet, you should try it out. it's a very simple integration process with channels like Teams, Slack, Facebook, Skype, etc. So in this sample, in this demo, I basically have a virtual assistant template bot. So it can do basic things, including base conversational intents in multiple languages, dispatching, Q&A, etc. So this will be my root bot. Basically, I created a very simple virtual assistant bot which comes with all these inbuilt capabilities, right? Then I connected my bot to a skill, which is the point of interest skill. So this skill basically helps the user in finding out a point of interest or directions to a particular point of location, etc. So let's start by interacting with this bot. So asking me for this basic information. So right now, what we're doing so far is being taken care of by the virtual assistant template bot, right? So let's say let's just try out few sample queries, and the virtual assistant can basically, because it's already trained with language understanding, it can understand basic greeting conversations and respond accordingly. Now, let's say I want to now find out directions or location of a specific point of interest to me. So let's find me the nearest cafe. Right, so now when I am saying this is where the virtual assistant, which already has, let's say Delhi, which already is linked to the skill, the virtual assistant will now transfer this conversational logic to the point of interest skill, and now the skill is taking care of the entire conversation. So as you can see, the skill is pretty rich. It's very well trained. So apparently there is more than one Delhi in the world, and it's asking me to select which is my exact location. And once I do that, as you can see, it's found out close by cafe to me, and it's given me that response in this bot. So so this is how I mean you should be able to now get a sense of how these skills are, you know, already very rich and very useful component that you can very easily add to your basic root bot, and then invoke it accordingly for meeting different requirements. So as you can see, the skills has the skill is responding with these pretty rich cards and buttons, and let's say I ask the bot to show directions, and then so on and so forth. So this is how this skill is, you know, very easily. This is something that you can very easily take advantage of in really building a strong and powerful AI experience in your bots. Now, moving back to the presentation. Right. So just to give you an understanding again of how at runtime this skill was working, right? So when we asked the bot about the nearest cafe, the root bot's adapter receives this activity from the user and forwards it to root bot's activity handler. Now the root bot uses then a skill HTTP client, as you can see here, to send this activity to the skill. The next, what happens, the skills adapter receives activities from the skill consumer and then forwards them to skills activity handler. When the skill responds with you know, the cafe location that we had asked for, basically the root bot's skill handler receives this activity and then forwards it to root bot's adapter. And next, what happens is the adapter sends the message that it has received from the skill back to the user, and that's where we got our location of our nearest cafe. So I hope that gives you an understanding of these skills. And just to quickly show you, right, there are a lot of these skills that are already available. So these are all the samples that you have. I will share this link with you in a while, but these are the samples that's already available. You can check it out to see what is it that the bot can do, follow the configuration steps and add it to your bot and play with it. And lots of experimental skills that I was mentioning. So for example, you can even add Spotify to your bot. So this is pretty cool. You should definitely try it out. I'll just share the link in chat in after my session. So now back to our presentation, right? So the next interesting thing that I want to cover is the bot framework composer. So this is also something that can really make your lives easier as developers. So this is an open source tool that basically provides developers with a central environment to get started with bot building very quickly, basically allowing you guys, to focus more on logic and dialogue management instead of spending a lot of time on the scaffolding to begin with bot development. So there's everything that you require for a bot development end to end. You have your visual dialogue editor, tools to train and manage language understanding, powerful language generation and templating systems, and a ready to use bot runtime executable, which I will also just show it to you in a while. All right, so coming to the demo, right? So this is my bot framework composer. So this is a pretty simple application. You can go and download it in your device. It's available for all OS. So it's available on Mac, Linux, Windows, and you can just install this application and then start creating bots from the UI itself. So as you can see, this is the application. I am inside my application right now. And let's say I want to click on add a new application. So as you can see, there is an option to build an application from scratch, or there are also some readily available templates which you can use as maybe the starting points of your bot and then build on top of it. So let's take the to-do example again. Then you just give a name for your application, description, location, and then you save it. So once you do that, it basically creates a skeleton of a bot for you, which will, depending on the template that you chose, even if you try to build, a bot from the scratch, it's still going to have a basic skeleton which you can start building on top of. So as you can see, it's pretty simple to create a new bot here with just a few clicks, drag and drop. And you have all these functionalities here, right? So starting with dialogues, these are all the dialogues as part of your bot, starting with your main dialogue. So the name of the main dialogue is taken as the same of the name of your bot that you entered. And this is basically your root and entry point for your bot. So as you can see, these are different dialogues that have been added as part of the template. Then you can also go ahead and create a new dialogue. Now, if you want to build something on top of this, or create a new trigger for that matter. So like I said, right, triggers are what, basically that will connect intents with your bot responses. So think of one trigger as one capability of your bot. So you can go ahead and add a trigger from here. Then if you see all these icons here, right? So you can also go and in user input, you can go and control by defining and managing all the intents. So basically each intent will describe a particular user intention through what the user enters. So these are all intents that are already defined in this template. And then also you can go and add more intents. Then you can also control bot responses. So this is where you see all these different responses to the different intents that we've already defined. And yeah, So you can also go and start creating new bot responses and new user inputs, and that's also going to be, a pretty simple. Basically, by clicking and using through the UI, you will be able to add these new capabilities to your bot. Now, let's go back to the design, right? So, if you look at this, right, this is basically showing you the flow of how this bot is going to work, really making it easy in your mind to understand or change something that you would probably want to do. So what you see here is an action. These basically define how the bot will respond to a certain trigger. So let's just try to change something here. So you can just click on it and then start adding I ask me about build, and you can just start adding whatever it is that you need to add. So I think this would really give you an overview of how easy it is to quickly add a dialogue, quickly add an action, and edit what is it that you want the action to do. And as you can see the plus icons here, so you can also add in the specific flow itself. Let's say after this response, you want to ask another question, or you want to create different loop or if else conditions, etc. So it's pretty easy to put that structure into the bot and use this canvas to create it. Then let's say you want to start the bot. Oops, I don't have an author key right now, but just to give you an understanding, right? Let's create a bot from the scratch and let's try to run it. So once you basically start this bot, right, it's going to complete the entire process of publication of the bot and make it available for you to try and test it. So once you do that, this also directly has a link to the bot framework emulator that I was using before. So once that's done, it typically shows you an option to open your emulator and start testing the bot. Right now it's just taking too much time, probably because of my machine, but that's essentially how this works. So let's just give it another few seconds. If this loads, then I will be able to show it to you on the bot emulator. But essentially how it works is once you're done, you can start the bot, which is basically then training it. Yeah, so and then you just click on test in emulator and it opens up the emulator for you. So let's say you allow access, and then as you can see, I have started. We don't really have anything in the bot yet, but this is where you can see the bot ready for you to test it and debug it from here. So that's about the bot framework composer. Definitely try it out if you want to quickly set up your dev environment for a bot and start building on top of it. So that brings me to the end of my session. If you have any questions, please let me know. Also, the presentation that I use, I'm going to upload it on a OneDrive and share it in the chat so that in case you want to go back and see something, please feel free to do that. And I will also, right after my session, add links to useful resources which you can use to get started with all these new updates. And yeah, thank you.